The motherland lived in a strange country. Indeed, the Azerbaijan nations have an ancient history. It's an irrefutable truth. However, unfortunately, differently from the neighboring countries in various reasons, the historical geography of Azerbaijan has not been entirely developed hitherto. Let's know that the historical geography is a science having a lot of directions, so it has several aspects like definition of territories, boundary matters, and administrative and territorial division. Administrative and territorial division, settlement of inhabitants, their migration, the geography of agricultural production, industries, transport, etc. Were obliged to establish with a heavy heart that the destiny and history, the past culture and artistic heritage of Azerbaijanians scattered all over the world. Southern Azerbaijan, North Georgia, Northern Caucasus, Russia, Middle Asia, etc., including the Azerbaijanians of Armenia, have neither been a subject of separate investigations nor included into scientific circulation. As it was mentioned above, the Azerbaijanis living in Armenia could not find a place in the history of Armenia due to their national identity, and were not paid attention to in the works devoted to the history of Azerbaijan because of their living in the history of Armenia. Simultaneously, their fate, literature, culture, and morality are inseparably linked with the fate of Azerbaijan over the time of centuries. It's strange that there are authors intending to introduce the Azerbaijanis being as historical aboriginals of the territory subsequently called as Armenia, its indigenous population, as strangers. However, all historical monuments of Armenia as well as toponymies earnestly prove that Azerbaijanis have been the main inhabitants of this territory. These thoughts have been confirmed also by the modern Armenian investigators. For instance, Yeseyan wrote in 1865, in the international policy the term Armenia meant Turkish Armenia till 1917. Only subsequently Armenia was exposed to geographical displacement and its national and state essence was identified with our present motherland, the flourishing and developing Soviet Armenia. The reverberations of our past monumental material culture disappeared or stored underground, as well as the various trade routes of ancient Kursat and Irevan, the present capital of Armenia. The sad whispers sounded by these non-monuments and their sources expressed as inscriptions or figures on rocks and headstones, as well as the architectural samples covered with dust and identified meanings of toponymies, are results of labors of our ancestors acting as gardeners, carpenters, painters, thinkers, literaries, poets. Undoubtedly, neither discussion nor comparison nor criticism nor interpretation but investigation, analysis, and particularly great respect. But we got aware of the resources feeding a significant layer of our history not from the books or works devoted to the past but from the travel notes, hypotheses, and interpretations, descriptions, impressions made by foreign travelers and investigators. We gratefully value their works and efforts, firstly because, getting aware of our culture, they astonishingly notify the world community regarding the monuments of material and spiritual culture reached and failed reaching till present days. It's a natural approach expressing our gratitude, but there is a bitter truth. The monuments constructed by our ancestors living and creating here during centuries and causing admiration of those seeing them failed to become the stories of the modern fount of our culture. The doors of this important source of our historical past still remain closed and the knowledge stored there is not entirely learned yet. Maybe one of the reasons for it's the fact that the travelers and investigators were not interested in the nation or creators of these monuments affiliate with, and they did not know their names and the differences, calling them either Persians or a general term of Muslims for simplicity. The first volume of the works, written by Jean Baptiste Tavernier coming to Irevan, specifies that our own Muslim people lived in the urban fortress. Another French traveler, Saint Chardin, coming here 18 years later, specifies in the first volume of Own Town 10-volume works that the Irevan fortress may be considered as a small town. The fortress had 800,000 settled only by Persians. The toponymy specified by Jean Chardin at the same time in the same records refute his assertions regarding Persians. The lands of the town are irrigated by the waters of the Kurbolak River flowing from the south to the west and the Zengi River flowing from the north to the west. A fortress tower called Hirikichi Galasi is located in distance of 1,000 steps. These assertions cause question if the inhabitants owing the fortress are Persians, why the briefly called the rivers as Kurbula or Zengyu, as a fortress was established by the Persians inhabiting very wide they called it Tawres Kichigalasi. What was happened to the Persians, praising at that time the posse of own language, that they used the words Kurgala, Bulak, and Kichi always existing in our vocabulary, and said these words the foreign travelers, really Arabians, Ethiopians, Lasgis, Tajiks, Abkhazians, and Adarians are Muslims. Why do their interpretations of these terms entirely differ? After Tavernian and Chardin, a lot of European travelers had rapidly described the glorious Irevan fortress with admiring architectural monuments, as well as the Khan's palace with the famous mirror salon, the decorated mosques in the fortress, pools and bath houses, the underground marble staircase leading towards the Zengyu River, the palaces surrounding the fortress, the caravanserais and squares. Despite of describing them, they failed to avoid the principle of naming them as Iranian lands, subordinating to the Iranian governors and calling the inhabitants living in these areas as Iranian and Persian people. In order to imagine fairly who were the people erecting these monuments and living in fortresses and towns, let's dig through the well-known facts related to the ancient history of Irevan. The name Irevan first appeared in Armenian sources of 7th century AD. David Irevansky also took part at a meeting called by Abraham. From the end of 14th to 15th century, Irevan was known as an administrative center. During the government of Karakoyunlu 1410-1467 and Akoyunlu dynasty 1467-1500, due to geographical location and local conditions, its name obtained widespread and became the administrative center of Chuhursad province. There is a mausoleum in the village Jafarabad adjacent to the city, the monument of that period. The mausoleum was made from burned brick and stone, and the heads on there are names of Emir Said and Pir Hussein, his son. Pir Hussein was an emir of Chuhursad before Yaqub Bey. The head of Karakoyunlu dynasty, Commander Kara Yusuf 1410-1420, is also mentioned on this headstone, and it's indicated that his son Pir Budak was a great governor. Undoubtedly, this mausoleum was raised in his honor by the order about accession to the throne of Padishah in Tabriz, his son Pir Budak, after the Azerbaijan lands owned by Timurids on the south of Kura, Georgia, Armenia, Arabia passed in the hands of Kara Yusuf. Saying about important commands given to Irevan Khan in connection with the building of Irevan fortress, the new buildings, improvement of the city and its fortification by Sheikh Ishaq Ismail 1502 and 1524. Irevan Shah found that there was no connection between names Irevan and Irevan because names of Irevan was known since 17th century. A lake has been made, length 400 width 250 sazens, and new channels have been built in the purpose of irrigation of urban lands during the period of Muhammad Qudaband's government, 1578-1587. This lake was rehabilitated during the Soviet period and named after Shamyan, but it's still named by local residents as Tohmak. Tohmak was the name of Mahmud Khan, the governor of Irevan of that time. In 1605, after Shah Abbas conquered Irevan from Ottoman, he assigned Emir Khan as a governor. Armenian historian Zakaria wrote, as soon as Emir Khan became the owner of Irevan, he commenced the rebuilding works, built a fortress, erected a palace, planted a garden, created a well-furnished place, made vegetable gardens and channels, improved water supply of the town. The earthquake happening in Irevan on June 4, 1679, razed it to the ground. Zakaria arrived there not long before this earthquake in order to congratulate Zalkhan Ailishli, the new appointed governor of Irevan, described this event. There was no stone left standing. Mosques, caravanserais, churches were ruined. The fortress razed to the ground. Bridges fell, waters went into the earth. Dead were more than alive. There were neither cats nor dogs around. Zalkhan Abbas Khan's son-in-law sent messengers to notify about the terrible event. 800 men arrived from Ganja. Muhammad Khan brought a whole troop from Nakhchivan. There were so many people arriving from Barda, Zaya, Maku, Tabriz, from neighbor Khanate and Sultanate that was no room to move. Mirza Ibrahim, the vizier of Azerbaijan, arriving from Tabriz on July 1st, became the governor of Irevan. The fortress was erected again and fortified still more. Canals were made and bridges were raised. Mosques, caravanserais, churches were built again. The town was revived and its inhabitants were returning to constructed houses. Can these people who revived this raise to the grand town, who fortified the ruinous fortress, who raised even more beautiful and marvelous estates, people who came from Bardazayam, Tabriz, Makun, Nakhchivan, be Persians? Is it really possible? Then why the names of reconstructed canals, mosques, and caravanserais, rebuilt squares, gardens, and places are not in Persian, but in language of our ancestors Azerbaijanis that were living at that time in Irevan? Toponyms mentioned in works of aforesaid travelers, as well as in works describing Irevan written by August von Gagstrausen, Chopin, Warova, and other travelers and explorers, even today are a reminiscence of our historic past, which is still unstudied for some reason. Let's pay attention to the names of places. Blocks, Shilyachu, dyers of red clothes, Sabunchu, soap boiler, Boyakcha, diary, Tokhmak, mallet, Tepebaşı, top of a hill, Demirbulak, ferric spring, Bahçalar, small gardens, Yoncalık, place of evergreen with clover, and Berchular, heathery, Kervansaras, Gürcü, Georgian, Julfa, textile worker, Tağlı, arched, Sulu, watery, Susuz, waterless, Hacali, springs, Demirbulak, ferric spring, Kürbulak, fort spring, Delmebulak, pushed through spring, Serdar, commandery, rivers, Kederçay, flowing river, Kürbulak, forty springs, Zengi, sonoris, gardens, Derabağı, gardening, ravine, Dalmabağı, pushed through spring, Demirbulak, ferric spring, Dereken, village and ravine, Şehir, town, Abbas Mescid Meydanı, square with mosque, Göy Mescid, Blue Mosque, Zalkhan Meydanı, Zalkhan Square, Fəhle Meydanı, Worker Square, Böyük Meydan, Great Square, Şehir Meydanı, Town Square, Qala Mescidi, Fortress Mosque, Hacı Beyim Mescidi, Hacı Beyim's Mosque, Zalkhan Mescidi, Zalkhan's Mosque, Günlüklü Mescid, Day Mosque, Günbəzli Mescidi, Vaulted Mosque, Şəkər Mescidi, Town Mosque, Novruzəli Mescid, Novruzəli's Mosque, Qanlıtepe, Bloody Hill, Üçtepe, Three Hills, Qızıltepe, Gold Hill. Undoubtedly, each of these words had native for us used by foreign travelers and explorers, contain historical information, and this information should be studied and put into the culture found long ago. Even now, Irevan blocks, springs, rivers, gardens, mountains, and hills keep their names among people as well as in some official documents. For instance, according to information given by Chopin, there were 3 large blocks in Irevan in 18th century. Şeker, Tepebaşı, Demirbulak, still having the same names. According to the descriptions of travelers of 18th century given for blocks of dyers of red clothes, soap boilers, dyers of blue clothes, these blocks had the names Şilyaçı, Sabunçu, Boyakçı. The following facts prove once again that in Irevan, as well as on the territory of the Irevan Khanate, on Azerbaijan had prevailing influence in widespreading and not Persians, Arabian and Armenian languages. A letter from the font of Matine Daran Arşe was written by the priest Kukas in 1784. In this letter there was given a list of names of sent to Georgia for Irakli II by Azad Isak Pasha, their quantity and price. Strangely enough, but it's the fact that clergyman Gokaks, the skilled expert on the Armenian language, wrote the names of practically all seeds in Azerbaijani. Buğda, wheat, karpuz, watermelon, Qarakarpuz, black watermelon, yonca, clover, khiyar, cucumber, ispanak, spinach, reyhan, basil, badamjan, eggplant, gül, flower. In all works about the territory of the Khanate and its bounds, as well as in textbooks, the names of places are given in the following manner. From the Arpa River to the Gazal Kilsay village, from Karoglu Mountain along the Aras River to Nakhchivan and Sharur. Let's pay attention to the names of mahals, villages have been part of Khanate. Kürbulaq, Vedibasar, Şarur, Sürmeli, Saatlı, Seydli, Serdarabad, Talın, Zengibasar, Abaran, Dereçiçek, Derekent, Garnibasar, Geja. One more example, how could the fact that Armenian Ashur of Sep, who was delighted with capture of the Irevan fortress by Russians, wrote the following lines not in Persian, not in Arabic, not in Armenian, but in Azerbaijan language take place? And could this fact be considered as chance and causeless? May I be a sacrifice of the throne and the crown of Nicholas Pavlovich. May I be a sacrifice of a command under which takes duty from each Padishah. May I be a sacrifice of treatment made by Caliph Narses. Monuments of material culture of that period contain explanation of the fact that not only in Irevan but in whole Armenia there was a large number of Azerbaijanians living, creating and living evidences that reached our present days. Headstones of 1903, 1940, 1978, 1979, headstones of 1503, 1504, 1578, 1579, 1581 in Urud village of Sisian region prove that once again. There is an inscription on one of these monuments. This grave is about of delicate young man. Fate raised his delicate body to the ground, and signature written by Vali. Isn't it the thread connecting our past with modern life? There are a few data about the ancient history of Irevan. The cause is wars between Iran and Ottoman Empire lasting 366 years with intervals, the tongue being passed around, and at last the earthquake of 1679 razed the town to the ground. Chopin gives for the first time relatively exact information about population and its national composition. According to his estimate, there were 2,400 families and 12,000 persons living in Irevan during the government of the last governor. After Russians had captured the town, a part of local aristocrats' families moved to Iran, and Armenians came back from Iran and Turkey. At the end of the war in 1828, the national composition of population was as following: Azerbaijanians 1807 families, 7,331 persons; Armenians 567 families, 2,379 persons. Most part of information about architectural models in fine art patterns of Irevan reaching us related to the period after the earthquake. Quadrilateral buildings of caravanserais, which arches made from bricks and stones with carving, enraptured everyone by their originality and richness, by nice sparkling water streams of fountains, as well as by overall architectural appearance, considering the most beautiful and grand buildings in the town. In the Gürcü Kervansaray there were 78, in Julfa and Sardar 39, and each in Tağlı, Sulu, Susu 74, taken together in the Hacı Ali Kervansaray 40 benches. Chardan called the Kervansaray situated in 500 steps from Khan's palace the most beautiful building. He wrote, "The road 800 steps long leading inside was full of benches. There were 3 other buildings inside the building itself, beautiful mosque and 2 coffee houses. The Irevan fortress added luster to architectural appearance of the town of that time, representing a pattern of high architectural and art mastery of that time. The fortress, the palace inside of it, the mirror salon like a bride in jewels, twin mosques, 2- and 3-story buildings, bathhouses for men and women, built tastefully, marble pool 15 sazens long, 5 sazens wide, and 3 arshins deep, ornamented Tabriz kapısı, ornamented motifs, pictures of flowers, portraits, original architectural concept, richness of design excited all above-mentioned European travelers and writer Griboyedov, artists Mashkov and Gagarin to amazement and admiration. According to evidences of Lynch, impressed by beauty of the mirror salon in Khan's palace, the fortress mosque and the pool, countless numbers of mirrors of domes with fillets were sparkling like brilliants. Salons, ceiling and walls had been ornated from top to bottom. Pictures of flowers and birds, portraits of Fatali Khan, his son Abbas Mirza, Singulu Khan, his brother Hassan Khan, Rustam and Zahrab, in elegant frames painted in oil paint on linen and struck to walls were attracting attention as wonderful patterns of fine art. It's a pity that travelers, explorers, and writers who were delighted by creations of our forefathers' high-class workmanship, patterns of fine arts, and our ancient historical school of architecture related them to Iranian, Persian, and Chinese architectures. According to Lynch's statement, the Khan's palace with myriad salons belongs to gorgeous monuments of Persian architecture. Chopin said that this palace had been raised in style of Chinese architecture. Gurbayev, who often visited the Khan's palace, called ornaments of salon and ceiling Japanese. Archaeologist Uvarova, who arrived to Irevan in 1880 and knew about it from descriptions of Dubai de Montpellier related to 1843 when the town had been transformed into governor's residence, and then in 1904 archaeologist Uvarova, who arrived into Irevan in 1880 and knew about it from descriptions of Dubai de Montpellier related to 1843 when the town had been transformed into governor's residence, and then in 1878 had been abandoned due to absolute lack of care, exclaimed at the site of condition of mosque and ruined Irevan fortress. Oh, how much did they try to raise these palaces to the ground over the centuries? Uvarova compared the salon, which was the only reminder of the ruined Khan's palace greatness, with a fancy tea box. The archaeologists were admiration about the dome and minaret of the Blue Mosque, attracting attention from a distance. The dome towering proudly above the mosque as if it wants to demonstrate its importance and solemnity for the Muslim world. It's strange that after all that Uvarova taught about the palace mosque as about a pattern of fine art worthy of the Roshagan's brush in Persian architecture. Irevan Khanate, describing the greatness of the Blue Mosque built in 1760, concluded that Hussein Khan, sparing no expenses, wanted to leave a monument worthy of its Khanate, which would be built in style of the best Persian mosques, Shah Abbas Mosque in Ganja and the Blue Mosque in Tabriz. Then the author told about skilled workmanship, excellent Eastern style, and eminent master of Persian architecture. These deserving attention arguments bring us echo of another significant opinion. In 1501, Shah Ismail I won Irevan Mirza, the king of Akoinli dynasty, in Sharur region. Akoinli state collapsed. Safavid state began to border on the Uzbek state of Shaybani Khan in the east and on Ottoman Turkey in the west. As Marx noted, the whole military power of Ottomans was pointed toward the large territory lying from Amudarya to Farad and being under the Safavid domination. Shah Ismail fortified Irevan in order to protect it from this danger. During the government of blind Muhammad Khudabandi, a brother of Shah Ismail II, in 1578, a beautiful garden was planted and a Khan palace was built at the palace of the Irevan fortress. Farhad Pasha raised a fortress at the same place in 1583. During the government of Shah Abbas I, the son of Khudabandi, after Emirgun Khan was appointed as the Irevan governor, the fortress was extended, rebuilt, and fortified. A document kept in Matinadaran. Akoinli state collapsed. Safavid state began to border on the Uzbek state. These deserving attention arguments bring us echo of another significant opinion. In 1501, Shah Ismail I won over Irevan Mirza, the king of Akoinli dynasty, in Sharur region. Akoinli state collapsed. Safavid state began to border on the Uzbek state of Shaybani Khan in the east and Ottoman Turkey in the west. As Marx noted, the whole military power of Ottomans was pointed toward the large territory lying from Amudarya to Farad and being under the Safavid domination. Shah Ismail fortified Irevan in order to protect it from the danger. During this government of blind Muhammad Khudabandi, brother of Shah Ismail II, in 1578, a beautiful garden was planted and a Khan palace was built at the place of the Irevan fortress. Farhad Pasha raised a fortress at the same place in 1583. During the government of Shah Abbas I, the son of Khudabandi, after Emirgun Khan was appointed as the Irevan governor, the fortress was extended, rebuilt, and fortified. A document kept in Matinadaran, found of Persian manuscripts, numbered 233. provides exact and detailed information about that. Hüseyin Khan called Mirza Jafar, a chief architect of Ahmed Khan, from Khoy to Irevan in order to make this fortress more fortified and grand. The Mir Salon and Summer Palace were created under the command of Muhammad Khan, a son of Hüseyin Khan, in 1791. The Blue Mosque raised by Khatun Jan Beyim in memory of her husband Jahan Shah in Tabriz, and the peak of the Azerbaijan architecture of 15th century. It was not accidental that Tavernian called it turquoise of Islam, and it was not accidental also that Azerbaijan architect Nematullah built it in 1465. Haji Ali Hafiz, who had built the famous madrasa, and great Ahmed Shamistan constructing the Mejnun Shah's Mosque in Mashhad. Azerbaijan architects and masters who have gained reputation by their participation in building of Bibi Khanum's Mosque in Samarkand were famous not only in Azerbaijan but in the whole East. Is it possible that Shah Abbas Mosque in Ganja and Blue Mosque in Irevan are now the patterns of this architectural school? A master who restored the pictures in the Khan's palace, its rim subject compositions on the walls of the Mir Salon, who repainted in oil paint portraits of Fatah Khan, Abbas Mirza Hussein, Gulu Khan, Hassan Khan, online in 50s of last century, was our countryman Mirza Gadim Ravani, 1825-1875. Mirza Gadim, the fine expert of folk art, the master of portrait and ornament, whose creations became a part of the Gulf fund of our classic art and opened the new stage of development of our fine arts, has never left Irevan and Tiflis. We know Mirza Gadim Iravani not as Persian, Chinese or Japanese, but as a son of Muhammad Kishi, and Irevan